Last time I reviewed 3 manga series, only 2 of which were suggested by commenters. I'm happy to say that there was no need to pad this episode with my own suggestions, as people bombarded the last video with plenty of edgy manga. To make things fair, I randomly selected 3 comments on the last volume's video. For comments that had more than one suggestion, I just picked whichever one looked the most interesting. And I think that's enough setup. You all get the point of the video, let's talk about edgy manga. Fukushu Kyoshitsu, or Revenge Classroom, was published in 2013. This was a manga written by Yamazaki Karasu and drawn by Kaname Ryu, who is also known as Yo Ryu for some reason. Whatever the case might be, chances are you only know of these 2 names from this manga, as it seems to be their most popular work in English. This was suggested by Cider Bizette, who left me what might be one of the longest comments I've ever gotten on a video. I had 2 reasons for picking this one over the many, many suggestions that Bizette left on his comment. 1, it was the very first one. And 2, Bizette specifically pointed out how bad the ending was. I'm sorry if there's a great manga buried in this list, but when you give me bait like that, I'm going to bite it. So let's figure out what's so bad about Revenge Classroom. Ayana Fujisawa is being bullied. She's being bullied hardcore, and Ayana is fed up with it. She's going to get revenge on her whole class, and this is a good premise. And to its credit, Revenge Classroom does actually do well with this premise. There's a slow escalation as Ayana gets her revenge in early chapters. She's not outright killing her classmates, just hurting them or ruining them socially. The Battle Royale-esque classroom hit list actually provides a pretty good structure for Ayana's edgy episode. Each chapter is a new target and focuses on them getting their comeuppance one way or another. This all changes by the end of the first volume, as Ayana becomes indirectly responsible for the deaths of 2 of her classmates. And here's where you would expect things to ramp up. And they kinda do. But the manga really wants to have its cake and eat it too. It wants Ayana to be a morally bankrupt psychopath, but it also wants the audience to relate and empathize with her. So we get this strange balancing act of Ayana kidnapping and torturing people in increasingly violent ways, but never being the one to actually kill them. She's indirectly responsible for a good deal of deaths, but for most of the manga, she never actually directly kills anyone. And it's written in this way so that our antagonists can be worse than her. So its moral compass is all out of whack. But is it edgy? Oh yeah, it is. We have bullying, torture, kidnapping, blackmail, suicide, decapitation, all of which are features in Yandere Simulator. Wait a second. Yandere Simulator started development in 2014, shortly after Revenge Classroom started publishing. There's no way someone like Yandere Dev would steal ideas for his game that's still in development. If you want to blame anything on the excessive feature creeping mess that is Yandere Simulator, blame Revenge Classroom, because it seems like there are a lot of similar ideas being used in them. The difference is, Revenge Classroom only took 3 years to be a shitty disappointment. Now, I've teased it long enough. Let's look at this infamous ending. It seems to be a pretty common opinion online that Revenge Classroom started out fantastic and then botched the ending. While I wouldn't go as far to say that Revenge Classroom was ever fantastic, let alone even good, I would admit that it was a lot less convoluted in its early chapters. When people talk about the ending, they're probably talking about the very, very last chapter. But for me, I physically started laughing out loud a chapter before that. You see, at this point, Ayana has fallen into a complicated mess of a trap set by her classmate Mari. Mari has been apparently pulling the strings this whole time in an effort to get revenge on Ayana, while Ayana was trying to get revenge on Mari. Still following this because it's gonna get a lot worse. Ayana calls the police just before taking out her final revenge. Now, I thought this was a pretty appropriate way for the series to go out, since, spoiler alert, this is the first death that Ayana is directly responsible for. However, a loose end from a couple volumes shows up and chases Ayana around with a chainsaw until she falls out a window. I found this callback, this character showing up again, just to kill off multiple characters, a joke saved for the very last chapter. Hilarious. But still an appropriate way to end the series. After all, Ayana's getting her comeuppance from a character that she's wronged. However, this is actually another fake out, as the actual last chapter shows Ayana unconscious in a hospital bed. Ren, a rapist turned love interest, takes over as the protagonist here for the last chapter. He reveals that a character with absolutely no relevance to the story whatsoever was actually Ayana's half-brother. And he was the puppet master this whole time, puppeting Mari, who was puppeting Ayana, all so that he could get his revenge. And then it just ends. It ends on two characters that were never really actually that important talking on a rooftop. Compared to the straightforward hit list of the early chapters, this shit is way too complicated and involves a twist that never actually affects the main events of the story in any way. Why should it matter that one character was Ayana's half-brother when he was assumed to be dead only a few chapters before this? This is too much, so let's get into the rating. I'm giving Revenge Classroom a 4.5 on the edge. Nothing personnel, but this is one edgy manga. However, it stops short of being an edgelord, and I think that's because Ayana is in this weird limbo of doing edgy things, but somehow keeping the moral high ground of not killing anyone until the very end. For quality, I'm giving it a 2 out of 5. Even in the early chapters, Revenge Classroom was surviving off of edge and shock value than actual quality writing. If you're a big Yandere fan, though, this might be for you. Just skip the very last chapter. King of Thorn is a manga published in 2002, written and illustrated by Iwahara Yuji. It was adapted into a feature-length anime film by Sunrise in 2010, but we're not going to talk about it. Iwahara is probably best known as the author of Dimension W and the character designer for Darker Than Black. King of Thorn is a much earlier work, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Iwahara uses a lot of thick lines early on, making some of those early chapters a bit messy. But as King of Thorn continues, his art improves greatly, and by the end, it begins to resemble the style that we've come to see in Darker Than Black. King of Thorn begins with its main character, Kasumi, going into a cryogenic sleep in hopes of finding a cure for the Medusa virus. Instead of waking up to a cure, Kasumi and her fellow podmates are greeted by an overgrowth thorn. And then it's not too long before mutated dinosaur-like things start eating people. King of Thorn is a survival in the vein of Dino Crisis, with a slice of Resident Evil 0 and a dash of Q. And for me, that worked. I like just seeing these characters put into a extremely deadly situation. And unlike most survival manga, the cast isn't full of dead weight waiting to be taken out of the story. I mean, there's a couple characters. There's a few. But most of them serve a purpose to the group and get a good deal of development along the way. I also think I need to mention Marco, who is straight up just Billy Cohen from Resident Evil. Yeah, I wasn't just throwing out that reference. In fact, I was tempted to call Marco a ripoff until I saw that King of Thorn actually predates Zero by a month. I'm pretty sure Iwahara saw the marketing for Zero. So we have a tense survival horror atmosphere. Inside of this industrial military complex, how do we raise the stakes? You throw in magic, of course. Wait, no, go back. That's right, because almost exactly halfway through, King of Thorn changes its entire premise through retcons and explanations that make absolutely no sense. The Medusa virus? Oh, that was an alien with the ability to manifest human imagination into a tangible reality. Those cool monsters from the beginning? Yeah, they've been completely replaced with furries. Did you think we needed an explanation for why the main cast showed the basic human courtesy of not letting the main character die? No. Well, too bad. It was because there was subliminal messaging implanted into their sleeping pods so that they would get the main character to this point in the story unharmed despite the entire island trying to kill them. I get the feeling that King of Thorn suffered from the Gantz syndrome of having a bunch of mystery elements from the start and then no actual plan of how they were going to be answered. In Thorn's case, I think I would have preferred most of these questions actually just left unanswered. By the end, King of Thorn is unrecognizable from what it started as, and I wasn't a big fan. I was digging the survival horror vibe that King of Thorn was putting out in its first half, and had it been in anything else, I think I probably would have dug the fantasy imagination land powers of the second half. But unfortunately, these two never actually meshed together to create a cohesive whole. So let's get into the rating. For The Edge, I'm giving it a 2.5 out of 5. King of Thorn definitely starts out bloody and fools you with a tense anyone can die atmosphere. But pretty soon you start to realize that a lot of these characters are going to make it to the end of the story, and the only main characters that died were either assholes antagonists or get reincarnated into a bird with tits. And then after that, it loses its edge completely. For quality though, I'm going up to a 3 out of 5. Neither half is bad, they just don't mesh at all. And I feel like even when it went off the deep end, King of Thorns was at least trying something new. I just wish that I could have my survival horror manga separated from my shonen action manga. Fire Punch is a manga that multiple people have recommended, and one that I've had my eye on for a while. This is the first ongoing series by Tatsuki Fujimoto. Fire Punch started in 2016 and just finished last year. For an author's first series, Fire Punch certainly makes an impression. So let's get into why everyone is talking about it. Fire Punch is what you would get if the Human Torch used his flames on Wolverine, whose healing factor kept him on fire permanently. And if that doesn't sound like your jam, then maybe Agni's revenge quest to kill the man that murdered his sister and set him on fire will. But if that still doesn't sound like your thing, then stick around, because Fire Punch has plenty more twists and turns, making it into one of the most interesting manga to come out in the last decade. The series wears its influences on its sleeve. Fujimoto clearly likes movies, as the medium of film itself plays a critical role in Fire Punch's plot, elevating it to a almost meta level. Part of this influence comes directly from American superhero movies, which are referenced multiple times by Togata. Togata is probably one of my favorite characters next to Fire Punch Man himself. She's completely self-referential, a little edgy, and has one character twist that will definitely piss off a lot of people, but I like her anyways. It's through Togata's self-aware nature that Fire Punch really starts to become a deconstruction of American superhero cliches. Now, I know that word gets thrown around a while, but hear me out, because Fire Punch attacks these cliches so well that I would call it one of the best takes on American superheroes in recent memory. But, like always, is their edge. Yes, and oh boy, you better be ready. With the ability to regrow any part of his body, Agni is put through the shredder more than once, while other characters aren't quite as lucky to come back. There's also slaves, people being used as human batteries, and much, much more. Interestingly enough, there's no graphic rape in Fire Punch. Now, I know that's a sentence in and of itself, but there's plenty of implications, attempts, and characters that outright say that they've been raped. But as far as seeing it on the page, very little is actually shown. Almost like Fujimoto avoided drawing it because that would have been tasteless. But it's not just violence either. Fire Punch carries with it the most edgy thing of all: existential nihilism. Fire Punch delves into hero worship and god complexes, tearing down any and all forms of religious worship as it does. While Agni is paraded around as a hero, he's full of murderous intent. When he's worshipped as a god, he's on the verge of a mental breakdown. And it doesn't stop there, as Fire Punch seems determined to reject any and all forms of divinity and meaning in its story. It might be the first manga that I've read that says nothing actually matters and means it 100%. This isn't faux nihilism that can be found in any edgy manga. This is genuine nihilism disguising itself as a superhero story. And I'm not gonna get too into specifics because I think you should experience Fire Punch firsthand. There's definitely some stuff that I would like to get much more into, but maybe I'll save that for a later video. As far as ratings go, we're going to go 5 out of 5 on the Edge because the Edge is strong in Fire Punch, but not for the reasons you might think. Fire Punch gets a 5 out of 5 because of its nihilistic themes and its immense suffering, more so than any graphic violence or sex. For quality, it's going to be a 4 out of 5. This is going to be a bit controversial as Fire Punch seems to be one of those love it or hate it series already. Personally, I loved all of it, but there were a couple things that didn't quite come together in the end, and not in the way you might expect. I have no problem with Fire Punch's actual ending. It's more just that there were a few plot threads along the way that seemed to get cut off abruptly, and not in a way that I think it's intentional, although there were those too. Due to its themes and subject matter, Fire Punch is not going to be for everyone. But if any of this sounds interesting to you, then it's probably a safe bet that Fire Punch will be up your alley. I haven't read Chainsaw Man yet, but it looks metal as hell, and I'll probably give it some time to get going before I binge through the series. If it wasn't obvious, Fire Punch gets edgelord of the episode by being the only manga that doesn't fall apart halfway through. This video, and others like it that I have planned, are part of my monthly manga review. That's right, I'm gonna try to have a manga-related video out once a month, and we'll see how that goes. As far as edgy manga goes, I have more than enough suggestions for a Volume 3, but new recommendations are always welcome. And I'm thinking that we're gonna change it up next time. Instead of edgy manga, we're going to look at ecchi manga. And I'm not looking for the best, I'm looking for the absolute worst. So post your comments below or on Twitter for your suggestions of the worst ecchi manga, and it might get covered in the next video. Just follow these 3 rules: English translated, complete series, and the most difficult of all for ecchi manga, no porn. This will be key in finding the worst ecchi manga series. I need to read the manga with the absolute worst case of blue balls out there, and I'm counting on you, the viewer. And that's about it for now. Go check out Edgy Manga Volume 1 if you want even more edgy manga series, and look forward to whatever else is coming on to this channel anytime soon. Who knows?